the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Imagine standing on just a pitch black stretch of dirt somewhere deep in the Iranian interior.
Right.
You are roughly, I don't know, a 20-minute drive from a major populated city.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can probably even see the ambient light pollution from the city just glowing on the horizon.
Which is a terrifying place to be.
Exactly. I mean, in any conventional military scenario, being this deep inside a sovereign, hostile nation's borders without like a massive invasion force, it's a death sentence.
Oh, absolutely. The response time for the enemy's quick reaction force there is measured in minutes.
Right. But you aren't hiding. You are actively operating heavy machinery.
Right out in the open.
Yes, you are laying down interlocking aluminum plates. You are literally building an airfield.
It's just wild.
And you're doing it while under active fire, surrounded
Right.
by an overwhelming curtain of American close air support.
Which, I mean, that fundamentally breaks the traditional rules of military logistics.
Uh,
Well, usually constructing an airfield requires, like, environmental studies, massive supply chains, stable staging grounds.
Right. Months of work.
Exactly. Months of uninterrupted engineering work.
Yeah.
So to compress that entire civil engineering life cycle into a handful of chaotic hours
At night.
at night inside the engagement zone of a hostile nation, it's a logistical paradox.
Yeah.
It requires a military apparatus that doesn't just tolerate friction, but is designed to completely override it through overwhelming localized violence and prepackaged infrastructure.
And, the craziest part is the objective of all this.
Right.
They didn't build this temporary runway to launch an invasion. They didn't build it to seize an oil field or establish a permanent forward operating base.
Right.
They built it to extract one single person.
One person.
An F-15E weapons systems officer who went down behind enemy lines.
It sounds like a Hollywood script.
It really does, but that is the reality of the operation we're breaking down today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone.
Glad to be here.
Today we are looking at a highly dramatic, intensely philosophical opinion piece published on Red State.
Right.
It was written by Ward Clark on April 5, 2026, and it's titled Bold, Brave, Unstoppable, U.S. Rescue in Iran Defines Our Spirit.
And we should probably establish the analytical framework for this right from the start.
Oh, thoroughly.
Because Clark's article isn't an after-action report or like a neutral wire service dispatch.
Not at all.
It is a deeply political, highly charged narrative essay. Red State is a proudly conservative platform.
Yeah, I mean, if you navigate to the specific piece, the text is flanked by banner ads for a Schumer shutdown sale for VIP memberships.
Right.
And the site actively fundraises to combat what they term the radical left and woke media.
Which is exactly why we need to state our mission for this deep dive.
Right. Our objective is not to endorse Red State's politics, nor are we here to debate their platform.
We're setting the politics of the site itself aside.
Completely. We want to focus entirely on the mechanics of the author's argument. We want to dismantle the text to understand the narrative Clark is constructing.
Because it's fascinating how a writer takes a highly technical, violent military extraction and, processes it into a grand philosophical argument about national identity.
Exactly. We're looking at how this specific event is packaged to define the American ethos.
To do that, I think we have to start with the physical reality of the event itself.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Because Clark's entire philosophical argument rests on the sheer audacity of the tactical execution. He builds his premise on the anatomy of an impossible rescue.
Right. Let's look at the inciting incident. Clark writes that a U.S. F-15E weapons systems officer, the WSO, the person sitting in the backseat managing the radar, targeting pods and weapons, goes down in Iranian territory.
And it's interesting, the article explicitly bypasses the circumstances of the crash.
Yeah, he just notes that the broader operational details are covered elsewhere.
Right, he wants to focus purely on the survival and extraction.
But I feel like we need to pause and just consider the mechanics of that moment. You don't just gently land an F-15E in the desert.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, ejecting from a supersonic Strike Eagle is a violently traumatic physical event.
It's not like pulling over on the highway.
No. You are subjecting the human body to massive G-forces. The rocket motors under the seat, they blast you out of the cockpit in a fraction of a second.
Wow.
and the wind blast alone can cause severe injury if you aren't positioned perfectly.
Right.
Then the parachute deployment is another massive physical shock. So before the evasion even begins, this officer is likely dealing with physical trauma, disorientation, and just a massive adrenaline dump.
Especially landing in a country that actively wants to capture or kill you.
Exactly.
And Clark specifically emphasizes what happens next. He notes that the WSO didn't freeze.
Right.
The text highlights that the officer relied on training, successfully escaped and evaded the enemy, and managed to surmount a ridge to reach a viable extraction point.
That phrasing is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Escaped and evaded.
Yeah, Clark is referencing SIRI, training survival, evasion, resistance, and escape.
Right. The pipeline.
This is the grueling, specialized pipeline that all high-risk military aviators go through. And evasion isn't just running away.
Yeah.
No, it is a highly technical discipline. It involves, like, calculating the enemy's search patterns, understanding how thermal imaging works, and how to defeat it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're moving almost exclusively during the darkest parts of the night and communicating with command structures using encrypted burst transmission radios to avoid triangulation.
So they can't pinpoint your signal.
Exactly. You are trying to minimize your thermal, acoustic, and visual signature in an environment where the enemy knows roughly where you landed.
And Clark's inclusion of the detail about surmounting a ridge is vital here.
Very much so.
The WSO had to physically navigate to a topographical position that a rescue force could actually reach. You can't just extract someone from the bottom of a steep ravine.
Right. The individual on the ground has to actively participate in their own rescue by making themselves extractable.
Which sets the stage for the logistical miracle that happens next.
Yeah.
While the WSO is executing this highly disciplined evasion on the ground, the military command structure is initiating a timeline that Clark points out took merely a matter of hours.
A matter of hours.
Special operations forces were brought in, briefed, and deployed, while equipment was staged forward.
We really need to unpack that timeline.
Please do.
Because a matter of hours in military logistics is almost incomprehensible.
Right. Usually the military moves incredibly slowly.
Exactly. How does a sprawling bureaucracy shift from a resting state to a fully coordinated multi-domain invasion force in the time it takes most people to finish a workday?
It's crazy.
It requires a permanent state of hair-trigger readiness, specifically within elements like the Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC.
Okay.
You are completely bypassing the standard military decision-making processes. There are pre-approved, highly compartmentalized contingency plans for downed aviators.
So they already know what to do before the guy even hits the ground.
Yes. The moment that emergency beacon goes off, you have distinct echelons of capabilities snapping into place.
Wow.
You have airborne command and control, redirecting satellite assets. You have quick reaction forces boarding aircraft whose engines are already turning.
Literally sitting on the tarmac, ready.
Right. You have aerial refueling tankers scrambling to create a fuel bridge over the ocean.
But the crown jewel of this compressed timeline is the improvised airfield.
Oh, absolutely.
This is the detail that forces you to just stop reading and really think about the mechanics of what Clark is describing.
It's mind-blowing.
He states that the U.S. military built an improvised airfield deep in enemy territory. And the geographic detail he includes is stunning. He says it was only a short drive from a good-sized Iranian city.
That proximity is the most dangerous aspect of the entire operation.
Why is that?
Because if you are operating a short drive from a city, you are operating inside the immediate response radius of the Iranian military's motorized infantry and mechanized units.
So they can get to you fast.
Very fast. You aren't sneaking in and sneaking out. You are deliberately creating a static target in an area where the enemy can easily surge hundreds, if not thousands, of troops down paved highways right to your doorstep.
Right. Think of this improvised runway like a massive industrial set of Lego base plates.
That's a good way to look at it.
You can't land a massive transport aircraft, something like a C-130 Hercules or a C-17 Globemaster, which you need to move the amount of people and gear required for this on soft desert sand.
No, the wheels will sink.
Exactly. The plane will get stuck, and suddenly you have a downed transport plane on top of your downed aviator.
Right, which is a nightmare scenario.
So what's the engineering required here?
It's called rapid runway repair, or austere airfield construction. Special tactics teams, specifically Air Force combat controllers, have to infiltrate the site first.
In the dark.
In the pitch black. They survey the dirt, testing the soil's sheer strength, what engineers call the California bearing ratio. They have to find a stretch of land flat enough and hard enough to support the dynamic weight of a landing aircraft.
And if the dirt isn't hard enough?
Then they have to harden it. They bring in interlocking panels, usually something like AM2 matting.
What's that?
These are high-tensile aluminum panels that can be rapidly locked together to distribute the weight of the aircraft over a larger surface area of soft dirt.
Wow.
You literally have special operators offloading pallets of metal from planes that have barely stopped moving, locking them together like Legos in the dark, and securing a perimeter while the extraction force pushes out to find the WSO.
It's unbelievable, and Clark summarizes this monumental engineering feat by simply saying they built it and held it for the time they needed it.
Because the goal isn't permanence.
Right.
It is about creating a temporary, highly violent bubble of control in an uncontrolled space. You establish the runway, grab the person, load everyone back up, and abandon the infrastructure before the enemy can coordinate a massive counterattack.
But, holding that bubble of control required immense violence.
It did.
Clark uses a very specific, highly colored phrase to describe the extraction. He writes that the extraction happened while American munitions pounded the goblins who were after him.
The linguistic choice there is fascinating. Pounding the goblins.
It is an incredibly revealing choice of words.
Yeah.
By calling the Iranian forces goblins, Clark is actively dehumanizing the enemy.
Right. This is a standard psychological mechanism in combat writing.
Exactly. To strip the enemy of their humanity, making the violence against them easier to process.
Yeah.
But it also elevates the entire scenario into a realm of high fantasy.
That's a great point.
Goblins are monsters that creep in the dark. The American forces become the righteous light raining down from the heavens. It perfectly sets up his later arguments about American moral superiority.
And practically speaking, the light raining down is a massive curtain of close air support.
Right.
You can't hold an austere airfield near an enemy city with just the rifles of the men on the ground. You have to establish a cylinder of protective airspace above the extraction zone.
What does that look like?
We're talking about AC-130 gunships orbiting above, firing 105mm howitzer shells into approaching convoys.
Literally artillery from the sky.
Exactly. You likely have F-35s or F-15s dropping precision-guided munitions on any Iranian armor that attempts to move down the highways toward the airfield.
The coordination there is just mind-bending.
It really is.
You have special tactics operators on the dirt, communicating with aircraft miles above them, feeding them targeting data to obliterate enemy forces that are actively trying to overrun the runway.
All while trying to verify the identity of the WSO and get them onto a transport plane.
Which logically brings us to the aftermath.
Yeah.
You don't execute an operation of that sheer scale, projecting that much destructive force inside a sovereign nation's borders without a massive material footprint.
No, you don't.
And the text does not shy away from the cost. Clark explicitly pivots his narrative to address the losses sustained during the rescue.
He confirms that the United States had to leave some aircraft behind on Iranian soil. And crucially, he notes that these aircraft were deliberately destroyed by the U.S. forces to deny the enemy any intelligence.
This is where Clark transitions from tactical recounting to philosophical argument.
Yeah.
The loss of advanced military aircraft is a massive strategic and financial blow. But Clark's rebuttal to this reality is jarringly blunt. He writes, "So, we can build more."
That dismissal, "so we can build more," is the thesis statement of his entire value system.
We really need to quantify what he is waving away here.
Oh, the price tag is astronomical.
An F-15E Strike Eagle, or its newer variants, costs upwards of $90 million.
Wow.
And if they lost a special operations helicopter like an MH-60 Black Hawk or a CV-22 Osprey, you are talking tens of millions of dollars more.
Easily.
Clark is looking at a bonfire of hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars sitting in an Iranian desert and just shrugging it off.
Because he is establishing an absolute hierarchy of value.
Right.
On the bottom tier, you have military hardware. It is incredibly expensive. It takes years to manufacture, but it's ultimately a finite, replaceable commodity.
You can just make another one.
Exactly. But on the top tier, sitting alone, is the American life. In Clark's framing, the value of that single citizen's life approaches infinity, completely dwarfing any material calculation.
But I genuinely struggle to buy that this operation was executed purely on a moral basis, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
I want to push back on Clark's framing here, using his own details.
Right.
He insists throughout the piece that we did this because an American was in trouble, not because it was strategically important. But look at the destruction of the aircraft.
Yeah, the zeroizing process.
Exactly. He explicitly states they were destroyed to deny the enemy intelligence. If the mission was purely about the moral imperative of saving a human being, the rescue force would grab the WSO, jump in the remaining transports, and flee as fast as possible.
Oh, get out of there.
But they didn't. Under active fire, while holding a perimeter against approaching Iranian forces, they took the time to deliberately destroy their own aircraft.
Right. They are executing emergency destruction protocols.
Which means what, exactly?
It means you have special operators throwing thermite grenades into the cockpits to melt the avionics.
Jeez.
They are physically smashing the encrypted communication consoles. They are ensuring the radar arrays and the electronic warfare pods are reduced to slag, so that Iranian intelligence, and by extension their allies like Russia or China, cannot reverse engineer American technology.
Right. And taking the time to do that under fire proves that strategic calculus is still highly active, even in the middle of a rescue.
Absolutely.
Preventing advanced aerospace technology from falling into enemy hands is a massive strategic necessity. So isn't Clark's argument about absolute pure loyalty just a romantic cover for what is actually a very cold standard operating procedure?
That's a very sharp critique of his premise.
I mean, they went in to get the WSO, yes, but they also went in to ensure the crashed jet couldn't be exploited. The moral imperative and the strategic necessity are completely intertwined.
Right, but Clark needs the motivation to be purely moral to support his broader cultural argument, so he downplays the obvious strategic realities of denying the enemy military technology.
That makes sense.
But there is another layer to his dismissal of the financial cost that is incredibly fascinating, and it comes from his own biographical information at the end of the article.
Oh, this is my favorite contradiction in the entire piece.
It's so good.
If you look at Ward Clark's bio, he is an Army veteran. He served 12 years deploying for Operation Desert Storm and Operation Joint Endeavor in the Balkans.
So he understands the military machine intimately.
Exactly. But the bio also explicitly labels him as a staunch monarchist libertarian.
The libertarian paradox, it is a stunning philosophical collision.
Let's break down what a monarchist libertarian actually is for the listener.
Go for it.
Minarchism is a political philosophy that advocates for the absolute minimum level of state intervention in the lives of citizens. A monarchist wants the government shrunk down to the size of a postage stamp.
Barely there.
Right. They fundamentally oppose government taxation, massive federal bureaucracy, and public spending on things like infrastructure, education, or social safety nets.
The only legitimate functions of the state, in this view, are the police, the courts, and the military.
Specifically to protect the individual from force and fraud.
Exactly. So you have a writer whose core political identity is based on drastically cutting government spending and limiting the state's power.
Right.
Yet he is the one passionately arguing for the immediate, limitless expenditure of hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars to rescue one person.
It's wild.
He is celebrating the most massive, expensive, violent projection of state power imaginable.
How does he reconcile that? How does a guy who probably hates paying taxes celebrate the military blowing up a $90 million jet in the dirt?
Because for a monarchist, this specific action isn't a contradiction.
It isn't.
No. It is the ultimate fulfillment of the state's sole legitimate purpose.
Interesting.
The concept of the night watchman state argues that the government exists solely to protect the life and liberty of its citizens.
Okay.
So when the military moves heaven and earth to save this WSO, the monarchist views this not as government waste, but as the government finally doing the only job it is actually supposed to do.
Oh.
The state is fulfilling the fundamental contract of protecting the individual, and therefore the price tag is entirely irrelevant.
That makes perfect sense within that specific framework. It's the ultimate insurance policy payout.
Exactly.
But Clark wouldn't just rely on this one Iranian rescue to prove his point. He anticipates that a reader might view this as a one-off anomaly.
Right.
So to legitimize his argument about this infinite valuation of American life, he essentially builds a historical legal brief.
He constructs a timeline of precedents.
Yes.
He writes that we have done this kind of thing before, and he specifically anchors his argument to 3 highly famous historical rescue operations.
He wants the reader to view the F-15E rescue not as an isolated incident, but as the latest chapter in an unbroken historical tapestry of American military ethos. Let's dig into the specific examples he chose because they aren't random.
No, they're very deliberate.
The first one he points to is from the Vietnam War. He mentions the rescue of Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Icil Hambleton, who is widely known by his radio call sign, Bat 21 Bravo.
The rescue of Bat 21 in April 1972 is legendary, and it perfectly illustrates Clark's point about disproportionate cost.
How so?
Hambleton was an electronic warfare officer who was shot down behind enemy lines during the massive North Vietnamese Easter offensive. The rescue effort to get him back lasted for 11 agonizing days.
11 days.
Yeah, it involved an unprecedented commitment of air assets.
And the cost was staggering. The U.S. military lost several aircraft trying to reach him.
Right.
Depending on the historical account, upwards of 11 to 14 other servicemen were killed and others were captured, all while trying to rescue this one single man.
It's tragic.
The sheer math of trading multiple lives to save one seems completely irrational from a detached, strategic perspective.
But again, if we apply the pushback we used earlier, there is a massive strategic imperative hidden inside that moral framework.
Okay, tell me about that.
Icil Hambleton wasn't just a regular pilot. He had intimate knowledge of the single integrated operational plan, the U.S. military's highly classified playbook for nuclear war.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He knew the locations of missile silos and strategic targets. If the North Vietnamese or their Soviet backers captured him and successfully interrogated him, it would have been one of the greatest intelligence disasters of the Cold War.
See, there it is again. Clark uses Bat 21 as the ultimate example of pure loyalty, ignoring the fact that the military had to rescue Hambleton or at least prevent his capture because he was a walking vault of top-secret nuclear intelligence.
Exactly.
The never leave a man behind ethos was definitely present, but it was heavily reinforced by cold, hard, strategic panic.
It is a recurring theme in how military history is mythologized. The moral narrative outlasts the strategic context.
Right.
And Clark does this again with his next example. He moves forward to the 1990s and tells the reader to look at the Balkans War, specifically the rescue of Air Force aviator Scott O'Grady.
Oh, Scott O'Grady's story was everywhere in the mid-90s.
Yeah, everywhere.
He was flying an F-16 over Bosnia in 1995, enforcing a no-fly zone, when a surface-to-air missile ripped his jet in half.
Just terrifying.
He ejected and survived on the ground for 6 days. He was eating leaves, eating bugs, wringing out his socks to drink rainwater, while Serbian paramilitary forces were literally walking within feet of where he was hiding in the brush.
The mechanics of O'Grady's rescue really highlight the evolution of the capabilities we saw in Iran.
How so?
When O'Grady finally managed to get a radio signal out, the military launched a TRAP mission, Tactical Recovery of Aircraft and Personnel.
Okay.
They sent in the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. They flew CH-53C Stallion helicopters hundreds of miles, skimming just above the treetops to avoid radar. They punched through heavily defended airspace, landed in a small clearing, grabbed O'Grady, and flew out while taking small arms fire.
It was a massive, highly coordinated risk.
Yeah.
And Clark traces this lineage back even further, reaching all the way to the end of World War II. He references the 1945 raid at Cabanatuan in the Philippines.
This was a significantly different type of operation, but it shares the same core ethos.
Right.
In early 1945, there was a brutal Japanese prisoner of war camp at Cabanatuan, holding over 500 Allied prisoners, many of whom were survivors of the Bataan Death March.
Oh.
As the U.S. military advanced, there was a very real fear that the Japanese guards would execute all the prisoners rather than let them be liberated.
So the U.S. command sends in a small force of Army Rangers and Alamo Scouts.
Yes.
They slipped 30 miles behind Japanese lines using a P-61 Black Widow night fighter aircraft, buzzing the camp as a distraction, completely overwhelmed the guards in a surprise night attack, and marched all 500 sick and starving prisoners back to friendly lines.
By synthesizing Bat 21, Scott O'Grady and Kevin Atchewin, Clark arrives at a definitive thesis about the American military character.
Which is?
He writes that the military did these things not because the larger war effort depended on it, but knowing there would be immense costs involved. He argues these massive historical operations were driven by a fighting spirit and an unbreakable standard of loyalty.
He is basically saying that the American military operates as a moral brotherhood bound by a sacred pact.
Exactly.
The objective of winning the war is almost placed secondary to the obligation they owe to the individual service member. If you wear the uniform, the entire weight of the U.S. arsenal will be deployed to bring you home.
And this internal military history is the launchpad for Clark's broader cultural and political argument.
Right, he pivots here.
He uses this concept of unyielding loyalty to draw very sharp, very deliberate contrast between the United States and the rest of the world.
He writes, in some parts of the world, in some cultures, the WSO would have been abandoned. Some countries, some cultures would have decided he wasn't worth the risk, wasn't worth the cost.
Now, he doesn't name specific countries here. He keeps it vague.
Why do you think that is?
He doesn't need to name them for his target audience. The rhetorical strategy is to establish American exceptionalism.
Right.
He is framing the United States as uniquely, fundamentally devoted to the value of the individual life. The implied contrast is against authoritarian or collectivist states, where a soldier is viewed merely as a biological component of the military machine, easily sacrificed or abandoned if the strategic math dictates it.
But he doesn't stop at contrasting America with foreign adversaries. He actually turns that critical lens inward and contrasts the America of this modern rescue with its own history.
Yes, he does.
He brings up the late 1970s. He notes that some of us are old enough to remember when Iran held American hostages for over a year.
He is referring to the Iran hostage crisis of 1979, where 52 American diplomats and citizens were held captive at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran for 444 days.
Right.
The context of that event is crucial here, specifically the failed rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, which ended in a tragic crash in the Iranian desert, resulting in the deaths of 8 American servicemen.
Clark frames this entire period of history as a lapse in the American character, a moment of weakness on the global stage.
Yeah.
And he explicitly ties the resolution of that perceived weakness to a specific political figure. He writes that the hostages were held until a president took office who even the mullahs feared, Ronald Reagan.
Looking at this neutrally, Clark is utilizing Reagan as the ultimate archetype of American strength and deterrence.
Okay.
In conservative political framing, the narrative is that the mere threat of Reagan's willingness to use overwhelming force compelled Iran to release the hostages on the day of his inauguration. By drawing a direct narrative line from the perceived weakness of the 1970s to the strength of Reagan to the overwhelming force used in this modern F-15E rescue, Clark is establishing a continuum.
So what's the argument there?
The argument is that projecting weakness invites capture, while projecting absolute, unapologetic strength demands rescue.
And if you look at the digital ecosystem where this article is published, you can see exactly how this narrative of projecting strength is applied to contemporary politics.
Absolutely.
Red State embeds what are known as read more links directly within the text of Clark's article.
These links act as contextual wrappers, guiding the reader's broader understanding of the event.
Exactly. Right in the middle of this philosophical essay about military loyalty, there is a bolded link that reads, President Trump unloads with expletive-filled threat to Iran on Easter Sunday.
Right.
And just a few paragraphs down, there's another link that says, we got him. President Trump responds as 2nd Airman is rescued from enemy territory in Iran.
This is a perfect example of how modern media platforms package information. The platform is actively surrounding Clark's historical and philosophical arguments with headlines about Donald Trump. It creates a symbiotic relationship.
Oh, so?
The incredible bravery and logistical success of the military operation validates the aggressive, unapologetic political posture of the political figures linked in the text.
They're essentially taking the military ethos of leaving no one behind and grafting it onto a specific political brand of toughness.
Exactly.
It's no longer just a military success. It is presented as a political victory for a specific worldview. But underneath all of that immediate political packaging, Clark is actually attempting to do something much more profound.
He really is.
He uses the rescue to completely redefine the concept of American citizenship.
This is arguably the most philosophically ambitious section of the entire piece. Clark dismisses the legal and bureaucratic definitions of what makes someone an American.
Right. He writes, you can't just make someone an American by having them pass a test and sign a piece of paper. Being an American means more than that.
If citizenship isn't defined by geography, or a naturalization test, or a passport, what is it?
Yeah.
Clark argues that it is an existential mutual valuation. He writes, being an American means you know that regardless of where you came from originally, you have value to your fellow citizens, and they to you.
That is such a deeply emotional reframing of national identity.
It is.
If you think about the traditional social contract, it is usually a mundane trade-off. We agree to pay our taxes, we agree to stop at red lights, we agree to follow zoning laws, and in exchange, the government paves the roads, funds the fire department, and maintains a court system.
It is administrative.
But Clark elevates that contract to a matter of life and death.
Right.
In his framing, the defining characteristic of the American social contract is the absolute certainty that if you are trapped in a hostile foreign land, your country will come for you.
The contract is, you belong to the tribe, and therefore the tribe will burn down the world, shatter international borders, construct runways under fire, and sacrifice hundreds of millions of dollars in technology to bring you back.
It shifts the idea of a nation from a massive cold bureaucracy into a fiercely loyal, heavily armed family.
And Clark concludes his piece by stating that this specific brand of tribal loyalty is what separates American culture from the rest of the world.
Right.
He writes that this rescue epitomizes a fighting spirit that has been unknown to most cultures throughout human history.
And then he delivers his final, defiant summary of the costs. So we lost some equipment. So what? After all, we can build more equipment, but every one of us is worth more than an airplane or a helicopter.
It is a sweeping, absolute conclusion that perfectly encapsulates the journey he takes the reader on. He starts with a downed pilot in the dirt and ends with a grand theory of human value.
Which means we need to pull all these threads together.
Let's do it.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today on this deep dive into Ward Clark's essay. We started by unpacking the staggering, physics-defying logistics of an impossible rescue.
We looked at how combat controllers and special operators built an improvised runway out of interlocking aluminum plates deep inside the enemy's response radius, shielded by a massive cylinder of close air support.
We analyzed Clark's complete disregard for the material costs of the operation, examining how the deliberate destruction of multi-million-dollar aircraft to deny intelligence was brushed aside.
Right, and we explored how this viewpoint perfectly aligns with the author's minarchist libertarian philosophy, where the state's only legitimate function protecting life justifies limitless expenditure.
We challenged the premise that these rescues are purely moral by looking at the strategic necessity embedded in historical precedents.
We analyzed the sheer cost of saving Bat-21 in Vietnam, the evolution of recovery tactics with Scott O'Grady in the Balkans, and the audacious distance of the Cabanatuan raid in World War II. We saw how Clark used these to build a legal precedent of loyalty.
And finally, we dismantled the political and cultural framing of the piece. We looked at how the legacy of the Reagan era and the immediate context of Trump headlines were woven into Clark's redefinition of the American spirit.
Framing citizenship not as a legal status, but as an existential life-or-death loyalty pact based on mutual valuation.
Which brings us back to the image of that C-130 lifting off from a dirt strip in the dark. The military suspended the normal rules of logistics, bureaucracy, and safety because the situation demanded it. And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought to consider.
Think about the psychology of risk. If a military apparatus operates under the absolute historical guarantee that they will move heaven and earth to bring one single person home, if they are willing to abandon advanced aircraft and build runways under fire, how does that safety net alter the mindset of the individual operator?
That's a great question.
Does knowing with absolute certainty that your government considers you functionally invaluable change your calculus? Does knowing they will come for you make you more willing to step out into the dark and attempt the impossible yourself?
It is a profound question about how institutional loyalty fuels individual courage. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly dense, deep dive.
It's been great.
We looked past the immediate political heat of a source to really examine the underlying architecture of its argument. Keep questioning the narratives around you, keep looking for the mechanical why and how behind the what, and we will catch you on the next exploration of the sources.
Under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart